Hello, beautiful sacred souls. I am Allison Batty-Capps, author of The Divine Within, Healing Ourselves to Heal the World, and owner of Blossoming Heart Wellness, where I do one-on-one spiritual mentorship and healing mentorship, as well as have online courses. In this video series, we have been exploring the concept of Earth as a school. And in this video, we're going to explore intergenerational trauma, specifically the system that we are born into. And this is to approach it from a trauma-informed healing perspective, not from a blame perspective. So I think it is important for us to understand how intergenerational trauma moves through families, cultures, systems, often shaping our nervous systems, our attachment styles, and even the behaviors we sometimes mistake for personality traits. This is a script that I have written, and I hope you'll stay tuned. So, my channel explores healing, trauma recovery, spirituality, and consciousness through a trauma-informed, psychologically grounded lens. What I share comes from my lived experience, my education, my healing journey, and my understanding of neuroscience, trauma, and yes, spiritual integration. Nothing here is meant to be seen as absolute truth or as dogma. It is merely meant to give my perspective based on my background, as well as to open a conversation and to help us think about these topics more deeply. Nothing here is meant to diagnose, replace therapy, medical care, or your own discernment. I invite you instead to take what resonates, to leave what doesn't. You are always the authority on your own experience. You may hear me use spiritual language, symbolic imagery, or speak about mystical experiences. Although spiritual experiences can be meaningful and real, they must be held with grounding, discernment, and nervous system safety. If anything you hear activates fear, urgency, grandiosity, contraction, or distress, that is a sign to pause, ground, and seek support, not to push through. In my experience, I have seen that that is something in the unconscious or the psyche coming to the surface to be healed and integrated. My intention through this channel is not to awaken, save, or heal anyone, but to share what has helped me reconnect with my body, my agency, my sovereignty, my humanity, and yes, my inner divinity. So you get to decide for yourself what supports you on your own path. That said, something I say may support your awakening or healing journey. So let's begin by understanding intergenerational trauma. Intergenerational trauma is the idea that unresolved pain from one generation affects the next. Biologically, emotionally, and psychologically, we see this in the study of epigenetics. It shows up in ways like family patterns of anxiety, depression, communication, or emotional reactivity. It can show up with things such as difficulty regulating emotions. It can show up as relationship struggles or repeated conflict cycles that don't have repair. This is not about blame. It is about understanding how systems shape our development and how trauma can live in us without our conscious awareness. So let's explore the biology of trauma, which is the study of epigenetics. So science shows now through these studies that trauma is not just psychological. It is actually biologically embedded. So epigenetics demonstrates that extreme stress or trauma can actually alter gene expression in ways that affect children's stress responses even before birth. Nervous systems actually inherit sensitivity to danger, hypervigilance, or emotional patterns from caregivers that have not processed and integrated intergenerational trauma that happened before or in their lifetime. So this is important to understand because it means we are not broken for being affected by our family histories. Mental health struggles are not brain disease. They are survivor adaptations. So we are literally survivors adapting to systems that were not always safe. So how does this relate to attachment wounds? Well, attachment theory helps us see how early experiences with caregivers shape our sense of safety and connection. So what this means is if you had caregivers that were consistently responsive, the child would have developed feeling safe and would feel comfortable exploring. This is what leads to secure attachment. However, if caregiving was inconsistent or unavailable, the child will have developed strategies to survive emotionally. This is what insecure attachment is. So the experiences that we had with our parents literally shape how our brain forms structurally. So trauma can produce avoidant, anxious, or disorganized attachment styles, which often show up in adulthood as relationship struggles or patterns of self-sabotage. These strategies are not bad personalities, they are survival mechanisms. I explore this in depth in my book. Survival strategies can be mistaken for personality. So many of the traits we see in ourselves, such as perfectionism or anger or avoidance or hypervigilance, seem like personality traits, but they are actually adaptive responses to family trauma. They are not inherent flaws. Hypervigilance may look like anxiety or control seeking. Withdrawal may look like introversion or coldness. Achieving may look like ambition or compulsivity. Recognizing these behaviors as survival strategies is liberating. It allows us to approach ourselves with curiosity and compassion instead of self-judgment. And when we approach ourselves in this way, it is easier for us to shift out of these survival patterns into more helpful patterns. So healing is actually about breaking the cycle. The goal of understanding intergenerational trauma is not to place blame on anyone. It is instead to take back agency so that healing can happen. Healing happens when we recognize patterns in our nervous systems and relationships, when we reparent ourselves with compassion and boundaries, when we integrate the wounded parts of ourselves that were acting out of survival, when we respond to current stressors from regulation instead of reaction. When we do this, we are not only healing ourselves, we are literally disrupting the cycle for future generations. This is how we heal the world and shift systems in society. We recognize the patterns in ourselves, we heal them, and we shift them. All right, I hope you feel empowered. This is something that I have personally done. My book not only is a guide for helping you to do this, but it is based on my own healing journey, which has taken place since 2008, where I had a profound mystical experience that led to a dark night of the soul, where all my trauma came to the surface. And I had to find ways to be with what I was experiencing and move through it. And that came from a deep study of psychology, neuroscience, and spirituality. So thank you for being present with this sensitive topic. Mystical experiences, symbolic dreams, and spiritual insights are deeply personal, as is healing. They are best understood slowly, with grounding, and often with professional or community support that is trauma-informed. True spiritual and psychological growth does not disconnect us from reality. It actually helps us inhabit it more fully. That is why spirituality that teaches transcendence instead of embodiment is actually re-traumatizing. I do not offer personal spiritual guidance, diagnoses, or personal interpretations through comments or messages, or engage in personal relationships through social media or email. If you are navigating intense emotional or psychological experiences, I invite you to seek trauma-informed professional care or trusted support. That said, I do offer mentorship and I have online courses through my website, Blossoming Heart Wellness. And my book, The Divine Within, Healing Ourselves to Heal the World, is a possible resource to support your healing journey and is available on Amazon and other online platforms. Thank you for being here, for honoring your unique nervous system, and for choosing a path rooted in compassion, discernment, and embodied truth. I invite you to take gentle care of yourself. and I'll see you next time. I love you. And if you found this message supportive, I hope you'll consider subscribing or following me on any of my social media platforms, or share it with somebody who might benefit from these teachings. This is an invitation if you find it meaningful.